Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us all on this foray into the world of cheese and wine matching. I'm Emma, and I'm one of the tastings and events managers, and I'm delighted to be joined this evening by Nick Bayne from the Fine Cheese Company, who has returned. You've seen him before, but he's returned once again to talk all things cheese. And we've got Catherine behind the scenes as well, doing all of the tech wizardry. If you have any questions at all, please do ask as we go through. I can see Mary Jane's already said hello, so we're all very friendly here, so please do chat away. It's going to be a really fun hour. Nick has chosen some, hi Nick, chosen some really lovely, very classic cheeses. And I know personally I've had a lot of fun and quite a few headaches actually, especially with the cheddar, trying to find wines that would match the cheeses. I'm expecting to have a lot of debate over my choices, so please do let us know what you think of the matches, or if you've had any other standout cheese and wine matches, or even standout cheese and wine disasters as well, because they do happen. But at the end of the day, as long as it's both tasty, then it can't be that bad. Use the chat function. Remember to pop down to everyone rather than to just the panelists so that everybody can read what you're writing. You can also post questions on the Q&A, and as we go through, Nick and I will try and answer all the questions as best as we can. So this evening, we're going back to basics. As I said, we've got classic cheeses here, and I've chosen some classic wine choices to go with them. Because we're going back to basics, I'm going to first of all just talk very briefly about cheese and wine matching in general. Nick, please do feel free to chip in wherever you'd like to. And yeah, and then once we've done that bit, we can get cracking with the wines and the cheeses. While I'm talking, please do feel free to sip on the on any wine that you've got. But if you've got the Sauvignon Blanc, it makes a really good aperitif, as well as going really well with the goat's cheese as well, I hope. So cheese and wine matching can be really tricky. As you know, cheese can be very full flavored, and then sometimes on the reverse, it can actually be very delicate. It's high in fat, which is something I like to gloss over as quickly as possible. So it has a real mouth coating tendency, which can make it quite hard for the wine to break through. And cheese can have a lot of salt in it as well, which again is something that you have to bear in mind when you're matching it with wine. Few pointers to get you started. We refer to it quite often, but what grows together goes together. So if you have a goat's cheese from the Loire, as we do of our first pairing, look to the Loire for your wine match. And if you can be even more specific, look to the exact subregion that the cheese comes from, and then see if you can match it with a white or a red that will go with it, because they've grown up together. So naturally, the flavors should work together side by side. White wines do tend to work better than red wines with cheese. It's because whites tend to have a lot more fruit, and they've got that acidity there as well, and they haven't got the trickiness that can come about with the tannins. The fruit and the acidity will help cut through the mouth coating qualities of the cheese. And then if you feel like it, you can look to sweeter and fortified wines as well. So just make sure you match weight for weight. So you're not putting something that's quite delicate in terms of a cheese with something like port, which could completely overwhelm it. But things like sherries, Madeiras, and kind of sweet white wines, such as Sauternes, which we've got for our final pairing with the blue, can make really, really good combinations. So just think of the kind of dried fruit and nuts that you would quite often serve alongside the cheese, and you're kind of doing that in the wine instead. And then on that note, if you do have a plentiful supply of glasses, pour out all the wines that you've got and just mix and match and try everything together with the cheeses that you have in front of you. So some of the matches might work really well, some of them might be really not awful because they're nice wines and they're nice cheeses, but they might kind of not work for you at all. But sometimes working out why a match doesn't work can be kind of more helpful and give you more insight than into the pairing than always being presented with something that works really well and you're never quite sure why. And then finally, I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about this, Nick. if you, rather than going for a full-scale cheese board like we have here this evening, so you've got cheddar, you've got blue, you've got goat, you've got a bloomy rind, you could just go for one cheese or one cheese family and one wine that works really, really well with all of them. So, you could go for a bloomy rind family and then just one wine that works kind of across the board with all of them. But Nick, what do you think? You're not sure?
You could. I think sometimes if you're going to do that, it might be better just to get one cheese. And you could do that, but it will sometimes be a little bit repetitive. I like to have a little bit of diversity and variability. If you do that, maybe not 3 different cheeses, or at least mix up your milks. If you're going to do bloomy rind family, make sure that they're not all cow's milk cheeses.
Interesting.
On the stronger side, like a nice ripe Camembert. One of them is a little bit milder, maybe a gentle triple cream of some sort. Maybe a bloomier goat or sheep's milk cheese. So if you are going to do that, just try not to hit complete sameness, because otherwise you'll miss the thing that excites us all about cheese, which is the just incredible diversity and variety of flavors and types of all of it. So yes, you could. Goodness knows I've had several washed rinds in one go. But just make sure, you vary a few things.
No, that makes complete sense. But I think, sometimes at Christmas, there's always that tendency to we have one blue, one cheddar, as we've done tonight, one goat. And then you look at the wines and you think, well, there's no, unless you're going to open a whole array of wines and do a little wine and cheese tasting, there's not one wine that's going to work across the board with all of those. So you're compromising somewhere.
I think there are ways of almost choosing the cheeses all together to match the wine. So for instance, if you have a nice kind of minerally white, well, that works well with a lot of things, but it's certainly going to be decent with a soft goat's milk cheese. It'll be probably all right with a richer bloomy rind cheese. It'll be great with an alpine cheese of some sort, Gruyere. Probably suits some wash rinds, and there are even a decent number of fairly gentle but savory blues that will go really well with. So you can get a really nice mix of cheeses. Just maybe, keep it in mind if you are trying to pair it with just one wine or just a couple of wines.
Excellent. So, I think we've talked enough about cheese and wine matching in general. It might be time to get on to the actual cheeses and the wines that are in front of us.
If I could add one thing to this, that I all of that is really, really good. And the only other thing I would add is when it comes to pairing cheese and wine, what you want to do is match intensities, but contrast the other elements. So for instance, fat versus acidity, sweetness versus sweetness, that sort of thing. You sort of want to contrast those. But if the wine is much stronger than the cheese, you're going to miss the cheese. If the cheese is much stronger than the wine, you're going to miss all the beautiful notes of the wine. You want it to be a really wonderful marriage where things just sort of mix together. So that would be my only other word of advice on that.
Yeah, it's there's a quote from a famous sommelier who said, cheese and, any food and wine matches is like having a conversation. You both have to you talk, one listens, one talks, one listens. And so if you're both shouting, then nothing gets done. So perfect. So do you want to tell us about the Sainte-Maure de Touraine, the goat's cheese that we've got?
Absolutely. And thank God we're starting there, because I need to get this thing off my neck, and that's the only cheese this really applies to. So we are starting with the Sainte-Maure de Touraine. In case you can't see it, that's this lovely little ash ripened goat's milk cheese right here. This comes from the Loire Valley, where I just was about 2 weeks ago. And again, while I'm wearing this thing, I was just competing in the Concours Mondial de Meilleur Fromager, the best international cheesemonger competition for the United Kingdom. And look, I came in third. So there you are, third
Congratulations.
best some measure, and for king and country. So now I can take this damn thing off. French flag on it. But let's talk about this beauty. So the Loire Valley is not only home to a couple of very important rivers, the Loire itself and the Cher, that fuel both wine production and lovely pasture. It's also the historical home of a lot of goat's milk cheese making in France. In fact, over 80% of French goat's milk cheeses are still made in the Loire. That includes both our lovely artisan and fermier cheeses like this, and also industrial cheeses. There is a lot of goat's milk there. Story-wise, that's supposed to date back to the time of the general, what we would call Saracens, although it's not quite the appropriate term at this point, rule of the area centuries and centuries ago, and they brought a lot of goats with them. Now, these are not the same goats really that have led to the goats in the Loire now. It's mostly Sauternes and some kind of more alpine goats, heavy-duty milkers, but the tradition of goat dairying has been there for a very long time. Now, this is what we would call a geotrichum ripened cheese. It's not a bloomy, it's not a white rind, it's this lovely little yeast imitating mold called geotrichum candidum. And it causes those beautiful little wrinkles or vermiculations you can see right there. The ash is sprinkled on the outside that actually helps to make the exterior a little bit more alkaline, a little bit more friendly for this mold to really prosper. This is one of the great named cheeses of the area, Sainte-Maure de Touraine. Touraine is a little town just outside of Tours, very, very famed for Sancerre production, for Vouvray production, but also certainly for goat's milk cheeses. Sainte-Maure is this beautiful little log shape. Not all are created alike. So with this one, you'll taste it. I think we should all taste it together here. It would be rude not to. So pick up a little bit. I hope it's at room temperature for you already, because that's the best way to taste cheese. First of all, give it a little smell, both on the outside. You can get the quality of the rind, a little bit yeasty. And on the inside, you're going to get a very floral aroma, a little bit of acidity. The acidity of this one specifically is from capric acid. That's the flavor of goat's cheese. Let's have a little taste. Now, if you're someone who doesn't generally like goat's cheese or has had poor experiences with soft goat's cheeses growing up, because who among us hasn't had really sticky, cloying, aggressively acidic fresh goat's cheese from supermarkets? This is the kind of cheese to belie that notion. It's beautiful. In particular, we work with an affineur, a ripener of cheeses for this cheese. So you could just get it from the cheesemaker, but we as a company in general, but believe in the ability of someone to sort of take something and transform it. So this particular affineur, ripener of these cheeses, is named Rodolphe Lemunier. His family have been involved in goat dairying for 3 generations now, dating back to his grandmother, who would smuggle goat's cheeses to market during World War II. And his particular calling card is the ability to really coax gentle, subtle, milk-forward, approachable, soft textures and flavors out of his cheeses, as opposed to the more aggressive, peppery goat's milk flavors a lot of us associate with both central and southern France. That's not what he's about. You can taste the delicacy in this. And what I really love about that is that actually helps it pair with wine a little bit better. That rich mouthfeel is just the thing for a lovely, slightly acidic, sharp, minerally white, maybe a little bit of limey fruit in that to come through. Because the more peppery and aggressive the cheese, the more kind of aggressive a wine you're going to need to pair against it. But this is all delicacy. This, to me, is the real, true flavor of the Loire Valley. It's rich, luscious goat's milk. And so I think that's going to be fairly nice with this little thing right here from Touraine, right next to that. So if you would go into that, I think I can't wait to have a bit.
Excellent. Off you go. So the Touraine Sauvignon then, I went for one made by Maison Bougrier, who are they're a family-owned negociant. They've been in the Loire since 1855 and then now run by, is it the 5th or the 6th generation that are now running the company? They've got huge domains and kind of winery holdings in 3 major areas in the Loire, so Touraine, Anjou, and Muscadet. So they've got full control over their vineyards, full control over grapes, and also the production in a number of sites, which helps them to really produce the kind of wines they're after. This is their Domaine Guénault, which is one of the family's own properties. In fact, it was actually the first vineyard that the Bougriers bought in 1885, situated on steep slopes overlooking the Cher River at Saint-Georges-sur-Cher. 4 kilometers from Château de Chenonceau. So if you know the Loire, a lot of people know the Loire by the chateaux dotted along the river. Chenonceau is one of possibly the most beautiful. So they're only 4K away. Steep slopes give excellent sun exposure, so the grapes get nice and ripe, which I think comes through. There's kind of a little bit of, there's good minerality to it, but there's also and it's a little bit of peachiness alongside the kind of typical mineral and kind of lemon kind of flavors that you get. And then you've got the chalk soils as well, which chalk soils, there are many that argue that the chalk soils help to give you minerality in the wine as well. So the reason I matched it with the goat's cheese is you're back to what grows together goes together. So for me, it was a kind of no-brainer to go to the absolute place that the goats, the Sainte-Maure de Touraine, came from, and try and find a white wine that also came from that area. There's acidity in both of the cheese and the wine, and I think when you try them together, the acidity almost cancel each other out, and that means that what you're left with is the kind of the fruit flavors from the wine and that kind of lovely, slightly earthy creaminess coming through from the goat's cheese as well. So they kind of snuggle up nicely together. And there's also,
I also get this. I get this like almost fresh green plum out of the wine once I have the cheese with it, and I get this slightly, almost like a slight fungal quality from the rind of the cheese which is really
slightly mushroomy.
Sure.
Love it. So that I actually, interestingly, if we do another one, which would be kind of off the beaten track cheese and classic cheese and wine pairings, I did also try it with the Loire Red. So I think it was a Saumur Champagny. That also worked really well. But I just thought, no, we're going classic. So I'm just going to keep it simple tonight. I do like it. I think the cheese is gorgeous. And do you want to say anything about the straw that runs through the middle of the cheese as well? Because I always find that bit fascinating.
Yeah, hopefully all of you who've joined us were able to pull that out. I used my little wooden tweezers for pulling toast out of my toaster. That's a traditional element to the cheese. It creates a small amount of ripening just at the center of the cheese. Nothing too much, but quite importantly, depending on the piece of it you got, if you clean it off, you might see a little bit of printing on it. Every single batch is recorded, sort of laser printed on these, and it also contains necessary traceability marks for this name protected cheese, so that if you're having a cheese that's called Sainte-Maure but doesn't have that straw in it, or has the straw in it and there are no marks, you're actually not having Sainte-Maure de Touraine. It's it has an AOC or AOP in other countries, DOP or PDO in other countries, and that means the cheese has to be made in this part of the world in this certain way to these guidelines from ingredients from immediately in the area. So it kind of protects the heritage and the savoir-faire of this.
It's a lovely cheese, and it's a good place to start. And I'm really glad that people are saying that they like the combo. So I'm like, yes, we're off to a good start.
We are. It's a really lovely example of what grows together goes together. And again, not all Sainte-Maures are created alike. There's a lot of very good Sainte-Maure out there, but I think Rodolphe de Minier is the best affineur I can possibly imagine for just pulling the beauty out of a cheese like this.
Excellent. No, it's lovely. It's lovely. That's my dinner for tonight, sorted completely. So do you want to talk about the Petit Camembert? Because as I was saying earlier, my Camembert is starting to try and crawl off the cheese board.
Yeah.
You're saying yours is a little bit more dense.
Mine is a little bit more dense, a little bit younger than yours, I think, though. I got seconds. So we're on to a Camembert. Now, a true Camembert de Normandy would not be made in this size. Other than size, this is a true Camembert de Normandy made by a Norman dairy from the milk of Normand cows, the Vache Normande, the beautiful speckled cows you see along the pastures and cliff sides of Normandy. But this is an ancient cheese, Camembert de Normandy. Must be made with the raw milk of at least 50% Vache Normande. And I think, yeah, here we go. Let me just grab a piece of this, bring it up to the light here. So there we are, our lovely Camembert de Normandy. Some of you might have it soft all the way through. Some of you, like me, I don't know if you can see that, might have a slight density to the center right there. And that's quite normal. We would call this an early ripeness. And in fact, it's where a lot of the French prefer to eat it, because then you get a couple of different flavors in the cheese. There we are. This is made by Grand Auger. They are a generations old cheese producer in Normandy, a little bit inland, about 2 hours drive off the coast, but not too far. And they pride themselves on their raw milk cheeses, although you can find pasteurized versions elsewhere. Now, the thing about a good Camembert, and the thing I really look for in a good Camembert, and what helps me pair it with any beverage, and classically in Normandy, that would be cider, is the rind on this thing. I want a gentle, thin rind, not too toothsome, not too chewy, not too kind of thick and sliding off the cheese. I want that to be just connected on there. The scent, you should get a little bit of sort of a white mushroom scent, and then a bit of ammonia. That's a very, very healthy thing. In fact, if you get a few little kind of slightly sticky orange spots, that means your cheese is getting really nice and ripe. Classically, the nickname for Camembert de Normandy is the feet of God, because it smells so sweaty and ammoniac if it's really nice and ripe. But what I look for in a cheese like this, and what makes it a really good pairing for wine, is it mixes those slightly buttery flavors one might expect with a bloomy rind with a big vegetal, broccoli, sometimes garlic, definitely brassica family note. Now, if you think of a good roast dinner and a good like roast broccoli side to that, that's going to pair really well with the wine you're drinking with it. And so those flavors start to kind of make sense in the context of having it with wine. Again, even when the classic thing they have it with Normandy is a bit of cider. So let's give that a little chew. Now, when it's this size of cheese, mine is again a little younger, so I still get a bit of acidity with this. When it's this size of cheese, it ripens a lot more quickly than the slightly larger version of Camembert. So you should have a really full flavored thing in front of you here. Or certainly, hopefully. Mine is beginning to run in my fingers a bit. Do eat the rind. Please, please, please eat the rind on this. It's very much a part of the flavor. At least try it. If you don't like it, toss it to the side. But I always have it as part of the cheese, because it's very much a part of the cheese with this one. And in fact, will help your wine pairing, because you get those lovely mushroomy flavors from the rind.
I was going to say, the rind really does give you that mushroomy kind of vegetal flavor, doesn't it? Which I love.
It absolutely does. I mean, that's Penicillium candidum, the white mold. It used to be called Penicillium camemberti for obvious reasons, but it's actually Penicillium candidum, the same mold you find on Brie, the same mold you find on triple creams like Briat Savran, on Baron Bigod. It will play with other molds as well. You know, if you really look at this, if you yeah, you can see it a little. If you look sort of at the underside, you'll see some rippling. And that rippling comes from that lovely little yeast imitating mold we just encountered, the Geotrichum candidum. And that's the very initial phase of development for this cheese. And then it's brought down to a lower temperature where it ages. And the Penicillium candidum really dominates and takes over and covers it with that beautiful, soft, bloomy rind.
It's beautiful.
I think so. But I also think Normandy in general is beautiful. It's a stunning part of the world. And they make great cheese. Some of the most ancient cheeses of France come from Normandy. Livarot, Neuchâtel, Pont-l'Évêque, and Camembert, which dates back to the 18th century for its current incarnation, but certainly further back in terms of the styles of cheese that were being made there, is one of that really famous four of Normandy.
Excellent. It's just interesting, actually, because I'm looking at a message that's just come up. So Ken's saying that they've got a younger Camembert like you do, whereas my Camembert is definitely more mature. And they think that therefore it goes better with the Touraine Sauvignon than with the rosé.
I would agree, because it has that little bit of acidity to it. And again, this is frequently with a bit of that center. That's where a lot of people in France prefer it. Depending on who you talk to, of course. Some people prefer it to be just absolutely running off the plate and strong. But having dual textures and kind of dual flavors in one cheese, I think is really delightful. It's the same experience as having a really good farmhouse Caerphilly, like Gorwith or Duckett's. You get sort of 2 or 3 cheeses in one cheese, and that's delightful. It does change what you can pair it with.
Yeah. So almost to get around that, you would get your camembert or your cheese, unwrap it, check out where it's at, and then decide on what wine you're going to go with.
Sure.
Obviously, presuming that you have a very well stocked cellar, of course.
I mean, you can always give it a squeeze too. You can usually feel if there's a little bit of density in the middle, and you'll know where it's at. If you feel soft through, go for what you go for.
Excellent.
And what for today?
Excellent. Okay, so for me, this was a really interesting one because, again, my go-to quite often for the bloomy rind cheeses is Chardonnay. I love bloomy rind cheeses and Chardonnays, but some people I've worked with in the past have absolutely hated that pairing because they think it makes the cheese taste really ammonia-y. And I'm like, okay, that's so again, I find that fascinating because it just goes to show just how personal food and wine matching is generally, but cheese and wine matching is even more personal kind of on the level. So I decided that I was going to go with a rosé for this one. So I was looking for a rosé that had lots of fruit to it. My oaky Chardonnay and Manchego. Yes, definitely. So a rosé with lots of fruit, but without too much acidity. I didn't want it to be really, really acidic, which is why I ended up going for a Grenache or a Garnacha, seeing as it's from Navarra in Spain. So this rosé is from Navarra, which is 100 kilometers from the north of the Appellation near Pamplona, to the south along the Ebro riverbank area. So it stretches, it's quite a wide area. The wine's made from 100% Garnacha. It's cool fermented in stainless steel in order to just preserve all of its fruit flavor. So if you taste it, it's got masses of kind of red currant and raspberry and strawberry fruit flavors. And as a good friend puts it, it is dangerously drinkable. Unfortunately, it is sitting at 14% alcohol, but it really doesn't feel like it. It carries it really lightly. And I felt with the cheese, it kind of, that fruit just kind of carries the kind of creaminess through. And for me as well, I think because when I did the run through, I also had another really ripe Camembert, so I've just been lucky. And for me, it matched up. The weight was good, kind of weight for weight. But also, it just accentuated that strawberry fruit in the wine. And then with the cheese, it just made it taste really kind of creamy and delicious. You trying it with the Sauvignon?
I am, because mine's a little bit younger. The younger one, I think I have to agree, actually. The younger one's working nicely with the Sauvignon.
Excellent.
I do wonder, because again, the classic pairing with something like this is a Norman or a Breton cider. And those have a slight tannic structure. One thing that sometimes works with certainly the stronger, riper Camemberts is a very light-bodied red. Very, very light-bodied, because the tannins actually sometimes work with this. If you have a riper Camembert, I suspect that this rosé pairing is going to be phenomenal. I think that is going to be great. But the younger one, because it still has the acidity, the Loire wine isn't too bad with it, I have to say.
So putting it out to the group then, if anybody's got a younger Camembert or a more mature Camembert, let us know which ones you think it really works with, or if you would go, off-piste and go for a completely different wine. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, have we had any questions so far that need answering?
Not yet. A lot of people are saying that they prefer the Sauvignon with the Camembert, which is good because it means 2 for the price of 1. You can have your goat and your Camembert and just the Sauvignon. But no, we haven't got any questions yet. So if you do have any questions, please do send them in, because we'd be delighted to answer. Well, try and answer them.
There are no wrong questions about cheese. There are never wrong questions about cheese.
Excellent. So
This is-
yeah, somebody was saying the maturer Camembert and the Rosé enhanced each other. That's good to know. And then somebody else is saying that they drank the Rosado with the Quintanao at lunch.
With the which?
Quintanao. I don't. Quintanao.
Look at this chat here. Hang on. There we go. I'm gonna try the.
Yeah, somebody else is saying that they've.
Wait, are you talking about the Quintano? Someone might be, quite possibly. Maybe, I don't know. Well, there is a cheese called Quintano, and the rosé would probably be fantastic. If it's not that, then who knows? But yes. Anyways, I think with the riper Camembert, in the end,
the riper Camembert, the Rosé works. With the less ripe Camembert, the Sauvignon works. So that actually makes me really happy, because it means you've got an option for for both kinds. So that's perfect. Yeah, they like the Lucy and Cheryl said they like the Rosé, but the Sauvignon works better for the younger cheese. So
and I have to say, you'd probably be very on the right track with a French Chardonnay of some sort, ideally steel tanks, not oak, so you don't get any of those vanillins. But if you have something steel tank, really nice and kind of grassy, bright acidity to that, I think that would be, like you said, a beautiful pairing with the Camembert. I know some people might find some ammonia off of it. I suspect that's probably just something that was in oak, but I've had a good deal of Camemberts with Chardonnay-based wines, and they tend to be really nice.
But as you say, also, going outside of the wine pairing, cider works beautifully as well, and also so do certain beers as well, can work as well, which obviously for another day, but
I think some lovely sort of saisons do tend to work quite well with that. Roger, I see you're saying Quintano. You were right. So Quintano, really quickly, is a washed rind sheep's milk cheese made just outside Bergamo by a wonderful cheesemaker named Lorenzo for La Via Lattea. I'm not surprised it works with this rosé, and the reason I'm not surprised it works with this rosé is that this is a Basque rosé. It's from Navarra, and what do the Basques make? Sheep's milk cheeses. They are among the masters in this world of anything made of sheep, and that includes the cheese. And I think something like that, if we're talking what grows together goes together, a nice lanolin forward sheep's milk cheese like the Quintano, even though it specifically is not Basque, I think that would be a bang on pairing for that rosé. So yeah, I'm not surprised that works well.
Amazing. And Catherine, thank you, because she's popped the link up. Oh, and somebody's had some Calvados with the Camembert as well. I love this. I love the amount of experimentation we've got going on this evening. This is
I will be having a little spot of Calvados with this afterwards. I've got a nice little 18-year-old over there in the other room, so I'll have a look at that.
You don't want to do it whilst this is going on.
I have the wine. I shouldn't.
Okay. So do you want to start talking about the Keen's Cheddar? Should we move on?
Absolutely, I would love to. So here, let me grab you a lovely piece of Keen's Cheddar. Here you are, among the prides of Somerset. It's cheddar. It looks like a cheddar. Well, let's talk about real cheddar versus cheddar. So Keen's Cheddar is a very, very real, historical, traditional cheddar. Typically raw milk, unless they have to make a little bit of variation due to kind of the rash of bovine TB we've had in Somerset the past couple of years, but usually raw milk. Their family is now on the fifth generation of cheese making. They've been making cheese on their farm since the 1890s. That's longer than anybody else making this style of cheese has been around. Even Jamie Montgomery's family has been going since 1911. So it's pretty incredible. Back in the day in Somerset around World War I, there was still about 250 cheesemakers of raw milk, farmhouse, cloth-bound cheddars. Now there are 4. There are 4 left in Somerset, and that's the tradition that they continue to preserve. So they're in Wincanton. George Keane is still out there making cheese, the head of the operation, but the rest of his family is still around him, helping to make cheese. Typically, this cheddar will be aged at least a year. We try to take it at a more extra mature age, but this one's about, I think, 13 months right now, so still a little bit younger. But Keane's is really incredibly distinct. I'm lucky in that I deal with cheese on a constant basis, so I can tell all 4 of the Somerset cheddars, which are Keane's, Montgomery's, Pitchfork, and Westcombe, apart by flavor and by smell. Keane's is quite distinct. It's probably the easiest to tell. First of all, they tend to have a really nice, rich, smooth, moist texture to the cheese, even though it breaks really nicely. If you give it a snip, especially towards the rind, you're going to get a really lovely kind of grassy quality, almost like moss, wet grass on stone. On the interior, you get that really nice acid. And the taste of Keane's is sort of onions, horseradish, a little bit of citrus sometimes. Even when it's young, you sometimes get a little bit of a tingle on your tongue. That's the histamines in the cheese, just doing their magic. And this cheese is incredibly difficult to pair with wine. Most cheddars are, to be honest. What goes together with these ones is going to be either a good cider or a beer or a really nice. The wine is tricky with cheddar. I think you've gone absolutely the right direction, by the way. I can't wait for this. I've been excited by this bottle since it arrived in the box the other day. But yeah, Keane's cheddar, George would probably say pair of cider with it, pair of beer with it. Wine is a hard thing. When you have a big, beautiful 24-kilo cheese aging slowly in larded cloth, you know, you're going to get some really sometimes wild elements to it. There's a lot of consistency to Keane's. They've been doing it since 1890, so they're pretty damn good at what they do and achieving a really constant profile. But as a raw milk seasonal cheese, you will find these variations. Some are going to have that real tickle in your mouth. That's difficult with wine. Some are going to be really horseradishy. That's difficult. Some of them are going to be really oniony. That's good to pair with wine. That's a good thing. And they also have this rich texture in the mouth. And for a hard cheese like that, that actually sometimes wreaks havoc with tannic structure. So you have to be really, really specific. But what you've done with this Malbec, and again, is the really smart thing, is you've matched the intensity of the cheese to the intensity of the wine. You can't have something really mellow with this, or it will just wipe it off the map.
And funnily enough, tried having it with, I did it with a fortified, a kind of port style from Australia. And I was like, nope, that doesn't work either. So that went too far the other way.
Yeah, you have to have a really, sometimes a really extra mature, very earthy cheddar. I think sometimes Montgomery's, especially if it has a blue streak, will do well with a fortified wine. But on the whole, you got to be careful.
Yeah, totally. Mary Jane has asked, as cheddar isn't an AOC, what geographic area can be considered true cheddar?
Right. So that is a little bit controversial of me. There is a cheddar PDO, actually. It's called West Country Farmhouse Cheddar. It is one of the widest, kind of vaguest PDOs there is. It involves block cheddars as well as cloth bounds. This cheese has been protected by it in the past. They don't really care about it anymore. What they care about is making it the right way. So cheddar as a cheese, unsurprisingly, if you know your geography, originates in Somerset, because that name cheddar is after the Cheddar Gorge, full of limestone caves, where in the past the cheese might have been aged, and certainly where the style was born near the town of Cheddar. The word cheddar is actually more of a process than it is a cheese. It's a process of how the curds are stacked, drained, and how they acidify. It's more of a recipe than the cheese itself. But for me, the truest of the true cheddars are raw milk, cloth bound, full sized, aged at least 1 year, made on the farm from the cheesemaker's own cows who are on pasture, right where the cheese is made. That is a true cheddar. Keen's, this cheese, is among those true cheddars. Montgomery's is, Pitchfork is, and Westcombe is. There are other great cheddars throughout the UK. You know, Quick's is down in Devon. Theirs are all pasteurized, but they're quite good. They're, you know, a farmhouse cheddar that's really lovely. There's certainly Isle of Mull cheddar, for example, made in Tobermory. That's absolutely fantastic and a very, very different flavor profile. There are a few others throughout the country, but if you want to get down to the purest definition of it, a Somerset artisan cheddar like this, that's really a true one for me.
But somebody said, what a gorgeous cheddar, and it's not often I say that from John. Yeah, it is a really nice cheddar. I do find some of them have such a prickle on your tongue that my mouth starts to burn, and I'm just like, I can't continue eating that.
Yeah, when this one gets extra mature, it really does that. It's not at that age right now, though, which actually makes it a little bit easier, I think, to pair. The extra mature one that would really just be like bees in your mouth.
Yeah, which I'm sure some people absolutely love, but I just find it a little bit intense. So I'll tell you about the Malbec then, and I'll give you a chance to drink it as well, seeing as this is the one you had your eye on. This is the Weinert Malbec. It's from Cavas de Weinert, which was founded in 1975 by Bernardo Weinert, who was a Brazilian businessman of German origin. It's gone on to become one of the highest acclaimed wineries in Argentina. And right from the start, Bernardo was really determined to make top quality wine in the best way possible. He's carried that on to this day. So it's kind of, it's almost been a kind of pet project in a way. He did a lot of research and study into the best place to set up. And he decided to start at Lujan de Cuyo, which is one of the areas best known for top quality wines in Mendoza. The climate here is really good for viticulture. So you've got low levels of frost. You don't have a lot of problem with hail or wind, lots of sunshine, and good water supply from the surrounding rivers and from the snowmelt from the Andes. It's a small operation by Argentinian standards anyway. They have 40 hectares of vineyards producing 1.2 million litres of wine a year. And he very much is kind of the style of Weinert and his kind of raison d'etre. He ages his wines for a long time in old oak castle foudres before he allows them out onto the market. So over time, you kind of the fruit, it softens and you get much more the kind of tertiary characters of leather and tobacco, and there's kind of cedar in there as well, which makes them a little bit similar to kind of other really long-aged wines like Chateau Moussa or kind of traditional Riojas. As I said, I kind of alluded to earlier, this is definitely, you alluded to as well, this is the match I found the most tricky. So my go-to with Cheddar is a Chardonnay, but this time an oaky Chardonnay. But I decided again to save that for a different day, and I thought we probably ought to have a red wine in there as well. So I went off down a rabbit hole. I can't even remember how many wines I pulled up onto the wine rack going, this one might work. Nope, too fruity. This one might work. Nope, either too light or too full-bodied or too fruity. It just didn't quite get the match right. And then I thought about it and I thought actually Weinert, because it has been aged for so much longer, you've got more of those kind of slightly tertiary characters, which I think makes it more interesting. So be interested to hear what everybody thinks.
I'm not sure if you know that you've done this, but whether intentionally or unintentionally, you've done a very pleasingly nerdy thing.
Go on.
In your pairing, because first of all, you've got your pairing right. I really love this pairing. It is bang on. It's great. And you have so many flavors evolving out of those two different flavors meeting, which I love because that's the ideal, right? Mm-hmm. The nerdy historical thing you've done, because as you obviously can't tell by now, I'm a huge history nerd as it relates to food, is that you have a cheese and a wine that historically, and we're talking hundreds, if not really a couple thousand years ago, originate in the same place, that have moved in a diaspora to the rest of the world, and now are being paired together again. Because predecessor cheeses to cheddar are cheeses like Cantal, Salaire, Layo, that are all from Auvergne. They were basically in the style of Cassius Formaticum, where curds were salted directly. This is the way the Romans would have made cheese, and a technology they brought with them as they as they conquered their way through Europe and eventually to Great Britain, right? So that style of cheese making moves from Auvergne, very specifically, to Great Britain. Now, the predecessor grape to a Malbec is Cahors, also from the Auvergne, also very from Auvergne. And that has traveled in its own ways, quite famously to South America at this point. We have these two cheeses whose origins are from exactly the same place, who now are in completely different parts of the world, and in a pairing, they can sort of come together as friends, long lost relatives. I think that is so damn cool.
Well, I would love to tell you that I was thinking of the historical significance of both Malbec from Cahors and Cheddar. I wasn't. I think I went through 7 or 8 different bottles of red before I went, right, this is going to be it.
You just felt it in your bones, somewhere deep inside, you knew.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's quite a few people again who really like it. And then I think Tony was saying that he finds the combination, the wine is too overpowering. And I do understand where you're coming from, Tony. If you've got the rosé, have you tried it with the rosé? That might work better. Or if you just happen to have some open Chardonnay in the fridge, do try it with some Chardonnay as well. Or I would be really interested to try this with a Forte, something like a Madeira or an Oloroso sherry as well. I think would be really nice.
Very wonderful. I think if this cheese maybe had just a couple more months on it, so a little bit more of the salt.
Yeah, then it would work with the sweet.
It would balance a little bit better. I see what you mean. Yeah, the wine is a little bit more, but it's still a good pairing. I like this pairing.
So the grape variety seen as ancestor to Malbec is it's still Malbec, but it's also known as Cot, C-O-T. And yeah, somebody's saying they had an Amarone. You didn't like the rosé, but the Malbec you did like. And then why would a Chardonnay be open and not be finished? That's a very good question, actually. I like that question. I'm trying to cut down on the amount I drink during the week. And last night I did open a bottle of Chardonnay and I managed to only have 1 glass, and then I took myself to bed. So yeah, it's very, very rare that you open a bottle of Chardonnay and don't finish it, but every now and then.
Whoever's opened the bottle of Amarone is a lucky duck. I love Amarone. I think it generally needs a slightly more mature cheddar with it because of that just massive alcohol burn on an Amarone, which we love. It's that hug it gives you. Certainly an Amarone, though, is going to be quite good with a lot of mountainous Italian cheeses, certainly in the Grana family, like a Parmigiano Reggiano, or some of the other kind of mountainous hard cheeses, Bito, Montasio Stravecchio, but there are some flavors in common between cloth-bound cheddars like this and those cheeses. So that's, yeah, good choice. Excellent choice.
Excellent. So shall we go on for the blue cheese?
Oh, why, yes, I think.
Are you ready? Have you got your Sauternes?
Have I ever? I do need to probably pour it. It's quite important if I'm going to have it. Right, so we have a Sauterne and we have a blue. That's a classic pairing. What everyone would always have with it is a Roquefort, maybe a Frume d'Ambert, maybe a Bleu de Verne. Those are the classic things to go with Sauterne. So we didn't. This is a beautiful cow's milk blue from Western Wales, but I think it has a lot in terms of flavor profile that is similar to Auvergne and Soulzon blues like those. So let's take a look at this beauty here. There is our Perl Las, which means blue pearl in Welsh. Some of the few Welsh words I know. This is made by Caws Cynarth, which means Cynarth cheese. They're in Cynarth in the hills of Western Wales near Cardigan. They're actually not too far from the Irish Sea at that point, really near the water. Absolutely beautiful, verdant area of the United Kingdom. The cheese-making room is way up high in a hill overlooking the town of Cynarth. There's a very famous kind of waterfall in the town. But none of that really matters. What really matters is this cheese. This is made with organic Welsh cow's milk by a cheesemaker who's now God, they're on their third generation of cheesemaking, but the really well-known generation was his mom, who was an absolutely ardent, avid, outspoken voice for Welsh dairying and the revival of artisan Welsh dairying back in the days when milk prices were being slashed and nobody could make a living off of it. So Corin has taken over as the next generation. He's a wildly inventive cheesemaker, makes a fair few number of different things. But this, I think, is marvelous and magical. It's a fairly young blue. It's pierced when it's fairly young. It's actually released when it's fairly young. But we've given you a wheel of it that's had a little bit of time with us to just mature a little bit longer. At its best, a blue like this is really perfumey. So you sniff that. It's like a floral bouquet. It's just biscuity, sweet, again, floral and perfumed. The texture is something like this. You want it to just melt in your mouth, almost like ice cream. Again, you get a slight biscuity flavor. On the savory side, a little bit of that slightly herbal kind of spice taste you get off of a blue cheese, and then kind of sweet, cultured, rich, buttery milk lingering on this thing. When you are pairing a blue cheese with a dessert wine, there are a couple different directions you could go. Certainly with Stilton, Stitchelton, our British style of territorial blue cheese, a port really is the classic way to go. And a tawny port at that, not something super over the top and sweet, but something with a little bit of tannic structure, or a really beautiful, rich porter or a scotch, right? But if you think about that, grows together, goes together, it works really quite well for blue cheeses that are either from France or kind of styled in that way. And so when you have something like this, that in a lot of ways represents either a bleu d'Auvergne in texture or a fum d'Ambert in flavor profile, that is begging, absolutely begging for a dessert wine like a Montbazillac, like a Sauternes, something a little bit lighter bodied with those sort of honeyed, gentle citrusy notes. If you want to push it into something not French, you could do a very, very lovely sort of gentle sherry that has, again, more of those sort of a Fino maybe that has lovely honeyed notes on it. But this is, this is the kind of cheese you absolutely want with a light-bodied, slightly citrusy, gentle dessert wine like this.
So there's a couple of questions that have come in. Can you eat the rind on this one?
You can. There's not a lot of flavor to the rind on this one, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's a natural part of the cheese. I would recommend giving it a try. And if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. Okay,
perfect. And then the other question actually that's come in from Tony, which I think is a really interesting one, is the maturity of the cheese, the feed that the animals have, can all have a really significant effect on wine pairings, and what might work well tonight might not work well in a month's time. What do you think of that?
Yes, I mean, here's the thing. Cheese is a very seasonal product, not in the way wine is, that you can pick a specific year and sort of track everything. I mean, that is the case, but we don't approach it in that same way. we look more towards the different seasons of milking, where in the lactation cycle the animals are, what they were eating. So, if they're out on pasture versus primarily on hay or on feed, where that pasture is, if they're on pasture, mountain and alpine pastures have a very, very different effect on milk, and certainly have a different group of flora than cows grazing on the Bungay marshes in Suffolk. There are different qualities to each one of these things. The smallest iterations and variations make a difference in cheese. Now, this one has a little bit more consistency as it's pasteurized. So there's a little bit less variation than you would get with a raw milk cheese, where all of the microbial diversity in the raw milk is changing seasonally. But there will be differences in flavor and texture, depending on the time of year when this cheese was made. The milk might have more water in it, which means they have to drain it differently. It might have more natural salinity in it at a different point. Again, the cows might have been eating something different. So each one of these things does change qualities about cheese. And if you're really in the know, it can change which cheeses you choose what time of the year. For example, I personally eat Roquefort between late spring to late autumn, because then I know the Roquefort was definitely the product of sheep who were out grazing mostly on grasses and shrubbery, as opposed to in on hay, or worse yet, frozen curd that they're holding over so that they can make more cheese. I will typically, with alpine cheeses, I will look for cheeses that were made in the summer, because then I know the cows were on grass rather than on hay. And I really love, personally, the complexities of flavor and aroma I get from grass-fed alpine cheeses versus hay-fed alpine cheeses, with the exception of alpine cheeses that are always fed on hay year-round. And then, there's less variation and a very interesting quality to that. So you just have to kind of, to be honest, ask your cheesemonger. A good cheesemonger will know when something was made, what makes that different. On our own, if I did not work in cheese, it would be a little bit harder to discern. But in the same way that, you'll ask questions of a really good wine merchant or a sommelier at a restaurant, a cheesemonger who's worth their salt will know absolutely every single bit of that and be able to recommend you something that you like. Not just that you'll eat, but that you really enjoy.
I think also for me, it's kind of what we're not trying to do this evening is say you will have you should have this cheese with this wine. Because again, with wine, year on year, obviously it doesn't change month to month, but each vintage you can get a slightly different style of wine, depending on what's happened kind of with the climate during that particular year. So we're kind of just talking in a way a little bit more broadly and say these kind of cheeses work well with these kind of wines.
Yeah.
Give it a go, but also experiment. I always,
by the way, this cheese does work very well with this wine. It really mellows out any of the bitter herbal notes and brings forward this like kind of salty bread flavor that matches with the sweetness of this. It's beautiful. And I know you'll get to the Sauternes in a second, but
I will.
Yeah.
But I have to say it's funny because a few people have said, the first pairing and the last pairing, they've been the best. And for me, they were my most big no-brainers. The other two gave me a little bit more difficulty. But this blue cheese, I won't lie to you, this is the cheese that probably surprised me the most and bowled me over the most, because I'm used to really heavy duty, kind of full scale, powerful Stiltons, and I find them too overpowering, too blue. And so this one, I was like, wow, it's a little bit more delicate. It's, as you say, it's got that biscuity, creamy, kind of slight sweetness to it, which I absolutely loved. I was like, gosh, if blue cheese can taste like this, sign me up. So I was genuinely happy. There's one other question, though, that I want to ask you before I forget, is an Irish blue equivalent to the Welsh example?
Cashel blue.
Cashel blue.
Cashel blue, absolutely, made by the lovely Sarah Furno and her family. That's another one that's on the fairly kind of gentle side, has slightly winier notes than the Perl Las does, but still rich, buttery, pretty approachable, and to be honest, really damn good with a Sauternes. So if you're looking Irish, go straight to Cashel Blue. Do not pass go, do not collect $1 million. That's what you want.
Excellent. And Charles is saying actually tried the blue with the Malbec, and that really worked for him. And he says, just goes to show how different we all are. So true. And a classic pairing for blue cheese is also Sauvignon Blanc. So if you've got any Sauvignon left, do go back and try it with the Sauvignon Blanc, because it's the acidity in the blue cheese, which, you know, when you kind of really moosh it down with your tongue, it has got that lovely acidity to it. Can work really well with the acidity in the Sauvignon as well. So that's kind of matching like and like, versus with the Sauternes, what we're doing is we're going salty with sweet. It's that kind of salt-sweet combination that I really like. So just to tell you a little bit about the final wine. This is from Chateau Cantegril in Barsac, which has been the home of the exhibition Sauternes since 2001. Just as an aside, it's worth remembering that all Barsac can be Sauternes, but Barsac's the only commune in the Sauternes region that can label its wines sub-regionally, so Barsac. And that's because they've got this really silty alluvial soil that gives wines from the area more freshness, and it's a little bit lighter than the wines from the other communes. So Sauternes, Prégnac, Beaume, and Farges, all of which produce kind of creamier, rounder, more full-bodied wines, which would also work really well with the Perl Las. It's just I liked the kind of, I found for this one, it just had that little bit more freshness, which for me worked really well with the cheese. So it's a blend of 93% Semillon, 7% Sauvignon Blanc, aged in 25% new oak, and it keeps beautifully for up to 10 years, and it gets more and more kind of honeyed and toasty and kind of kind of funky almost. So classic pairing for blue cheese, because we always say mold goes with mold. So you've got the mold in the wine, which is your noble rot, and the mold in the blue cheese. So they work really well together. Sweetness of the wine and the saltiness of the blue cheese play off each other beautifully as well. And I did try this initially with an Australian port, but I was just like, no, it was okay, but it didn't make my heart sing. I wanted something a little bit lighter and a bit fresher. And so that's when I immediately went, and to be honest, I think any excuse to drink Sauternes is a good thing. It's one of my favorite wines, and it's so overlooked. And so considering the effort that goes into making it, it's extremely well priced. How long will it keep after opening? Oh, I mean, you could probably keep it up to about a week, as long as you put a cap in it, a kind of stopper in the top. What you'll see is, as the days progress, you'll see that it just starts to fade slightly, but that residual sugar that you have in the wine and the freshness that you naturally have in Barsac will act as a kind of preservative. So it will keep it for longer than, say, a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc would in the fridge, which I'd be like, no, just drink it over kind of 2 days. This one you could probably keep for a few days. And they do it in half bottles as well. So it's just,
and I appreciate, with this, you tried the Australian port, which is a fortified wine. This not being fortified, what's nice about that is the alcohol percentage is a little bit lower, and that makes it a little bit easier to pair with cheeses, especially that aren't quite so robust. A port will have a higher alcohol percentage and obviously is a lot darker and richer, and same as if you try to use a Pedro Jimenez or a Madeira or something. It's a very, very different ballgame. This is really, really delightful.
I'm glad you like it. I have to say, it's the kind of combination that makes me smile. And there's a kind of running joke in the tastings team. This is Sauternes is a wine that can bookend a meal. So you can have it as an aperitif with a packet of salt and vinegar crisps at the beginning of the night. And then you can have it at the end of the night with your blue cheese. So you need a full bottle in order to kind of get you through the whole, kind of run the gauntlet of both ends.
I'm sorry, did you say salt and vinegar crisps? Because
Absolutely.
try this.
Walkers. They need to be really cheap. Not that Walkers are cheap, so if anybody works for Walkers who's on this, I'm very, very sorry. You don't want the and sausages as well, so you can have it. You can actually just have Sauternes all the way through your meal. But the salt and vinegar needs to be properly, powerfully salt and vinegar rather than kind of a hint of cider vinegar with a sprinkling of sea salt. It needs to be kind of almost like discos. It's Walker's crisps, isn't it? Mary Jane's going Walker's.
I mean, I'm a co-op salt and vinegar chips guy.
Well, hopefully they've got enough power to them then. And then with barbecued sausages for your main course, and then with your blue cheese for your pudding. So that's your evening. You're done.
Amazing. This is blowing my mind. I'm going to have to trial this immediately.
So there's a few people who are saying try Whitstable oyster crisps. They sound really interesting. And then co-op salt and vinegar crisps are the best, apparently.
Yes. Hands down, the best I've ever had. They're so good.
Excellent. You would need a bigger bottle. You would definitely, a half bottle just wouldn't cut it for that. You'd need a couple of full-size bottles, I think.
Well, pairing with this certainly, and I would certainly end it with blue cheese. This is
I think this is my favorite pairing of the night. So thank you very much, John. We will definitely be all doing more cheese and wine pairings. I think Catherine's been talking to you about doing another cheese and wine pairing in the new year, which sounds it's I think it's going to be fun. And Mary Jane's saying the Sauternes and blue cheese kind of, they both enhance each other, whereas the others just kind of sat together nicely. So Nick, do you or Fine Cheese Company host any other events like this?
We do sometimes, yes. We do. So I've done, I don't know if I have any coming up. We've done some with a wine merchant in Bristol with Avery's, who are lovely. I do have an event in person coming up in Bath in November at Beckford Bottle Shop. And we have a few others here and there, but to be honest, the Wine Society, we've enjoyed the online events and the in-person ones we've done so much that I'd say these are our most consistent ones. But do look around, and certainly if you have any questions on cheese, come to us, get some cheese from us, talk to us. We're very, very friendly and very, very enthusiastic about cheese, even if it's not during an event.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for coming along, and thank you to you, Nick, for your cheese wisdom. And Catherine, thank you very much for being behind the scenes and doing all the kind of the tech wizardry. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do this at all. So thank you very much, everybody. Really lovely to see you all.
Thank you all so much for coming out and spending the time with us.